What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our ACC football channel.
We step in to Syracuse camp with John Costello from Noon's Magician. It's the SB Nation platform for the Orange. And, of course, Syracuse coming off a fine 10-3 campaign in Dino Babers' third season. He goes into year 4, and maybe some of the claims that he made and some of the aspirations that he voiced when he first took over the job not seeming so crazy now, John, as Dino Babers obviously garnished a lot of respect, and I think a lot of people had respect for him going into last season. But in regards to delivering a number 2 seed in the ACC and challenging Clemson the last 2 years, as they have like no one else, obviously he's got to have a ton of equity with the program right now.
Yeah, I mean, Dino came in and asked at the beginning for belief without evidence, was his quote, and kind of, asked us, it's going to be a year or two. It's going to take some time to put it all together. But, just have some belief without evidence. The proof's going to come. And also strove towards another quote of he wanted to be consistently good, not occasionally great. So, those first 2 years, pulling upsets against Virginia Tech in 2016 and Clemson against 2017, those were the occasionally great moments he was referring to. Last year, I think consistently good was probably more what we were looking at. So, his work's not done, and he knows that and admits that. But I think we've made a hell of a lot of progress in a very short amount of time, and I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, I think there should be a balanced outlook for anybody that follows Syracuse football in regards to certainly embracing what happened last year. It was certainly earned on the field in regards to, again, playing Clemson closer than anyone, earning 10 wins, a bowl victory, a number 2 seed in the conference, and all of that. But obviously it was 1 year, and programs are built upon recruiting class after recruiting class and then developing those players and sustaining success. Maybe not 10 wins every year, but trying to get to a level where 7 to 10 wins is probably the norm year after year after year. Got John Costello on the line from Noon's Magician. Join him for Syracuse football and sports coverage overall right there on SB Nation. So, John, in regards to recruiting, I mentioned that. We are accustomed to Syracuse over the last 15 years recruiting at a certain level. Dino Babers has upped the ante of sorts. Your thoughts about the current build toward 2020 and 2021?
I mean, the 2020 class is going. I think that we're seeing some nice additions. I know over the weekend we added a couple kids who camp with us. Ben LaBrosse, who's a 3-star safety from Canada. I mean, these are all your typical type of guys that we've been getting at SU since Dino came in. He's got a couple Power 5 offers. Stephen Mahar also committed. He's a 3-star tight end from Rochester. Big dude, though, 6'5", 225. Tight end's not necessarily going to be big in the pass catching game for Syracuse. We're going to need bigger players who can be blockers. And I think that, Mahar definitely fits that bill. We have a lot of other kind of blue chip targets, I think, and that's really those are the types that we've closed later in the class the past couple of years, Tommy DeVito aside, back in 2017. But a lot of guys are kind of playing wait and see on Syracuse right now. Last year's 10-3 was great, but as you mentioned, programs are built on several recruiting classes in a row and several good seasons in a row. So I think some guys might be playing wait and see with Syracuse to make sure that last year's 10-3 wasn't a mirage and that it's a sustainable amount of success that they're kind of signing on for.
Got John Costello on the line, joins us on a regular basis to break down Syracuse football. Maybe that those appearances by John a few years ago were because I was just fascinated with Syracuse and it's a traditional power going back to the 50s and 60s. But now, hey, people are talking about Syracuse football, John. That's got to feel good in regards to there's that category of afterthought teams and programs just because of what the expectations aren't.
Right.
And but now you're hearing your name brought up in regards to a Syracuse football program and the expectations for 2019 outside of Syracuse circles. That has to feel good in regards to national shows and ACC shows that actually have to take the time instead of just brushing through Syracuse to get to the other teams, where they're actually talking about Syracuse and being a legitimate contender for a nice bowl bid again this year.
Well, it makes content a lot easier in the offseason, I can tell you that. ESPN and everybody else does a great job of, here's the top 25 teams and here's, their impact player. Here's the top tradition. Here's the best player that is coming back or leaving or whatever. And having those is easy jumping off points for content's great. for me, like I grew up like rooting for Syracuse, but not to the same extent I did once I went there. So for me, like this is really like as an adult, a first time thing for Syracuse, like really being able to enjoy and like really bask in this a little bit. Obviously, like we're experienced with it with the basketball program, but for football, it's fun as a football first fan and being like there's a small subsection of us among Syracuse fans that are football first, and it's nice for us to finally kind of get our moment.
Good stuff. Yeah, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Syracuse with John Costello, SB Nation's Noon's magician. You can join him and the rest of the staff right there talking up Syracuse and what, there's some sort of division out there, I'm sure. Some that say, hey, Dino Babers is great. This trajectory's headed up. And others that say, yeah, I got to see it again. Dino, I just enjoy listening to the guy. I was reminded of that at ACC kickoff, in which he was genuinely excited to field questions, talk about the team, talk about their expectations, talk about their hope. It was a lot of optimism, but not like some fake phony salesman optimism, but it seemed very genuine in regards to his excitement about what this program is building into.
Yeah, I think Dino manages the media game better than most, where he gives media what they want to hear without being fake, but never overextends himself. He never makes promises he can't deliver on, and he makes like modest promises. I think that's the core of any good relationship. And for him, his relationship with the media is kind of built on that too. I actually saw him out here in LA at an alumni event speak, and same deal. Like he completely covered the room and was like had everybody resting on every word. But at the end of the day, like he didn't necessarily say all that much of consequence, but because of how he said it and how he presented all of it, he's very tactful with media and he does a nice job. And it's great to have that positive attention on Syracuse in that regard, especially since I know, people love Jim Boeheim because he's a good quote, but he's not necessarily the friendliest face when it comes to media. And then like our previous football coach, Scott Schaefer, was not a media fan at all. So I think it's nice to see kind of that shift in the other direction.
So guys out there listening, you not only get your Syracuse information and insight from John, but if you listen intently, there are life lessons, relationship lessons to be gained right there. No question about that. As fall camp opens a little bit later this week, John, what are the storylines that you think are relevant, and what are you eyeing as you start to get news out of camp?
I think for us, like the offensive line is a position that lost 3 starters from last year, but we've been able to shuffle the deck chairs a little bit. We have a couple transfers, JUCO transfer and Darius Tisdale, who's coming along, and he's a redshirt sophomore. He'll be able to play right away. We're also bringing in Ryan Alexander, who's an all Sun Belt offensive tackle from South Alabama. He's a grad transfer, so we'll be able to plug him in right away. I think right now, like the preseason depth chart has a couple freshmen at the top, Carlos Federello and Anthony Redd. I don't necessarily know if those guys are going to stick there, just because I think Dino might be playing wait and see on the transfers a little bit and making sure that they understand the system. I think shuffling things around, you'll probably see former guard Sam Heckel head to center, former center Aaron Service head out to the tackle spot. Heckel actually started a couple years ago at guard, so despite the fact that we lose 3 starters, we actually have a lot more experience back at that position group than it might seem at first glance. And we actually have more depth probably at offensive line than we have at any point since we've been in the ACC, which is great.
Got some numbers here. The advanced metrics, John, would like you to speak to. 18 points per game was the gain in net points differential from 2017 to 2018. That's an obvious one. That's going to relate directly to going from 4-8 to 10-3. A team's going to improve drastically in regards to net differential, but going from a -5 per game scoring average to a +13 against the opponents. This one, though, delves a little bit deeper in the special teams. Didn't realize that Syracuse was number 1 in the ACC, number 2 nationally in special teams field position in regards to the offense being placed in a good place, the defense being placed in a good place, and the differential of yards on special teams exchanges favoring Syracuse that much. Again, number 2 in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to, Justin Lustig, who is an assistant coach, special teams coach with us. He came in a couple of years ago, and he's I mean, he's drastically changed how we played on special teams. The punt coverage team, I'd argue, is one of the best in the country. Kick coverage, probably has a little bit more room to improve, but we also have Sterling Hoffrichter, who's our kickoff guy and punter. Real booming leg, all ACC guy. He's been just instrumental in that. And then again, special teams has been opportunistic too. They've been able to create turnovers. The fact that we also have turnovers, as many turnovers.
You froze up maybe about 20 seconds ago.
What was the last thing you heard?
Yeah,
Or you want me to just restart on that?
Well, not necessarily. I could splice it together. You were the word was turning, but I don't remember exactly where you were in terms of. Yeah, it was just maybe 20 seconds before.
Had I mentioned Sterling Hoffrichter yet?
Yes.
Right. That was probably just then probably just talking turnovers more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just do a quick thing on that, and then we can. Just
okay. Yeah, I'll throw it together.
Yeah, so Syracuse was one of the best teams in terms of forcing turnovers in the country last year, and that also helped flip the field a ton. So, yeah, I mean, special teams, guided the ship there, but being able to flip the field quickly in opposing territory definitely helps that field position game as well.
Now, what sets us up for the next conversation, and that's the one that people talk about when they look from a national scale treetop observation, is obviously the quarterback change from Eric Dungey to Tommy DeVito. Dungey was an athlete. He was a baller. He was a guy that would mix it up with linebackers and safeties and really make plays with his legs, and averaged over 6 yards per carry if you take the sacks out of play. The number I'm looking at right here, had 12.5 non-sack carries per game. You would think the running backs would need to step in for as good as DeVito is expected to be. It's just going to be a different offensive approach, I would think, and you're not going to get those kind of improvisational plays from your quarterback.
No, I mean, while Tommy DeVito is a better fit for Dino's system and is a pro-style quarterback built for what Dino wants to do, I think the big difference here is just going to be the improvisational. What happens when things start to fall apart? Eric Dungey, I think, kind of operated only in that regard and not that he created things to fall apart, but I think because he was very run first, because he was always had an eye on making a big play, that might have potentially scuttled some of the play calling and some of the game plan. I think with DeVito's going to call the game probably to the letter, especially early on here. And so that's probably going to put more of an onus on both the offensive line protecting him and, the running backs. I think the running backs did pretty well last year. They had their best season in the ACC for sure. Dante Strickland had a decent year, but Mo Neal really broke out, averaged over 5 yards per carry. He'll probably take the lion's share of the carries this year, along with Abdul Adams, who was an Oklahoma transfer, actually scored 2 touchdowns in the Camping World Bowl because he gained eligibility for the postseason without losing a year due to the new redshirt rules. So we got to see a little bit of him. He averaged, I think it was over 9 yards carry at Oklahoma a couple of years ago. So really hoping that 1-2 punch can make up for Dungey's lost yardage.
Hey, John, we've talked scheduling through the years. You definitely have your opinion on how scheduling should be approached, both from a program standpoint and a conference and national standpoint. Your thoughts about the current schedule? I always look at who you're playing outside the division because, of course, I don't know that it matters in the ACC Coastal because everybody's about the same. But in many divisions, it obviously matters. Who do you play in the other division? And looking at, you always get Pitt. And then you've got Duke this year on the road. And then, of course, Maryland would highlight the non-conference slate.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think that this is the right schedule. I think for non-conference, if you look at ACC forces us to play, and rightfully forces us to play one Power 5 team outside of the conference. Probably every 3 years or so, that's Notre Dame. And in the season that it's not, playing teams like Maryland, playing teams like Rutgers, like we are in 2020 and 2021. And Purdue in 2023 and 24, facing those sorts of programs is probably where we should be right now. The ACC Atlantic's already hard enough, having to face Florida State and Clemson every year. I know Florida State's a little down right now, but traditionally is a very, very good and talented program. So like having those two games on the schedule every year automatically, I think, sets us and any other Atlantic team up like to potentially be a little behind the eight ball if you want to win, 8 or 9 games. So I think this year's a smart schedule. I wish we weren't going on the road at Liberty necessarily. But beyond that, like I don't really have any complaints. I think college football's main goal is don't lose. So why would you schedule losses?
There you go. And if you look at the division, I think it's potentially a great division. It's not one right now for what you cite right there. Louisville used to be a really good program. They're not right now. Florida State would be the one wild card and certainly not what they have been in 5-6 years ago. But there's also, to the defense of the division, there are no Illinois, Rutgers, Kansas, Oregon State kind of programs. Those programs that were Syracuse and Wake Forest have now become very good programs that win bowl games and get to postseason play. There's not a week out in the division at all. It's a good division top to bottom.
Yeah, and I'd argue in the ACC too. The ACC has an advantage over, your Pac-12, your Big Ten. The ACC, SEC really, like where there isn't, I mean, SEC maybe Arkansas this year, but like realistically, like we have a really nice conference top to bottom, and no, there's maybe not this like 4 to 5 team ruling class right now. It's Clemson and then everybody else. But at the same time, like it also creates, some really interesting matchups every single Saturday because you have so many fairly evenly matched teams. And now the Pac-12 is case in point of how you like cannibalize yourself with that sort of approach. So I'm hoping we don't end up in that regard, in that bucket. Luckily, again, Clemson's kind of sitting atop the rest of us, but hopefully SU can maybe knock them down a peg this year. I'm not holding my breath, but you never know.
Really good stuff from John Costello breaking down Syracuse football and the ACC for us. You can join him and the rest of the staff there at Noon's Magician on SB Nation. John, thanks for stopping by as always.
Of course. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for watching this video. If you are an ACC football fan, please subscribe to the channel. Leave us your thoughts down in the comments below. And for the latest in ACC football, keep it right here